I'm Anna Capizera, and I write AD for Deluxe. You are listening to the Audio Description Narrators of America Know Your Narrator series, Beyond Your Narrator episode.
I'm Roy Samuelson, and today we have with us from AD Training Retreats, Jan Vulgaropulos. She is the co-owner of AD Training Retreats. Thanks for joining us, Jan.
Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
What do you love about audio description?
There are two main things I love about audio description. The very first is accessibility and fairness and inclusivity. It evens the playing field and it allows people who are kept out of our culture to be included. I am so committed to that. And prior to becoming an audio describer, I didn't even know it existed, in spite of the fact that my dad had lost his vision over a decade earlier. Later, my mom was to lose hers too, but it's definitely under the radar, and I'm sorry that more people don't know about it. Really happy to be part of moving it forward. The second thing I love about it is that it's really challenging. And I love puzzles. And so I love all the moving parts of it and the challenges of doing it well. You've got the piece where you need to observe carefully, and then you need to think of the perfect words that are succinct and vivid. Then you've got to figure out where they're going to fit in timing-wise. And there's a lot of editing involved. And I just love the whole thing. I love that it's an art, that you're sort of honing your craft. It's exciting. It never fails to be interesting and exciting to me. And now Colleen and I have been teaching this for 5 years. And I love that aspect of introducing it to people and helping people along with understanding what it is and guiding them in how to do it better and listening to them become excited and say, wow, I never thought of this before. Just the there's a lot of mind-blowing moments usually for students in the midst of learning how to do this.
I'd imagine that those mind-blowing moments and that passion that you're experiencing are coming directly from you and Colleen, that you're a part of that passion and it's almost osmosis being passed on to it.
We really do love doing the work together.
One of the things that I loved hearing from you about the moving parts of the puzzle, that there's an assumption made by a lot of people who are new to audio description that you do this step, and you do this step, and you do this step, and then you're done. Can you talk a little bit about some of the nuance in how you and Colleen approach audio description, whether it's the guideposts that you use or maybe some of the freedom that you have to make sure that the story is being told in the best way possible?
So the first step is to watch the movie or the work of art, the play, the TV show, and to observe very carefully, to pay attention to the whole gestalt of it and all the visual details, obviously. The second step is to also pay attention to where the spaces are, because we only insert the audio description in the silent spaces between the dialogue. And for some movies, that's much more of a challenge than others when there's a lot of dialogue. Regardless, we have a limited amount of time to describe everything that we're seeing. So one of the moving parts that's really most challenging is the editing, is the deciding what is going to make the cut and what won't. In the limited amount of time that we have, what will we describe and what can't we describe? So we have to think about, has the dialogue covered it? Has the tone of voice of the characters covered the body language that we may be seeing between them? Or do we need to describe that body language? Is that something that would be missed otherwise? Body language and facial expressions, I think, are some of the most important things that we describe, not just the actions of the characters. And so one needs to consider, and sometimes it's hard to consider how much of that is conveyed in tone of voice, how much is conveyed by the words that the characters have shared with each other. And if you had all the time in the world, you would really describe every bit of body language, but you have a limited period of time. So you describe what you can. Another moving part is to be succinct, to choose words that are very juicy, that really give you a great visual of what you're describing. We also have to pay attention to words that have less syllables or that are shorter are preferable than longer words if we have a tiny amount of time. And we often have to use sentences that aren't complete and use very brief phrases that will convey what we want to convey as quickly as possible. So that's a challenge, the shaving down of the actual chopping up of the words. Not missing the jokes is hugely important. A very distressing thing for our listeners is when a joke is missed. And jokes almost always have a visual component. And if you don't describe the visual component, the joke is not fully appreciated or completely missed. So we prioritize that when we're making our editing decisions, which end up being what makes the cut and what doesn't. What of the limited time that we have, what do we absolutely have to include? And how do we say it quickly? And how do we say it, as I say, juicily? How do we say it with really great words that are memorable, that bring to mind an image? And then you tuck it in. Tone of voice is important too. That's going to be matching the scene. You need to think about that. So it's all those things together. And I think that it's the kind of thing, there's no black and white answer. It's not, how would you describe that? Well, would be blah, blah, blah. Well, no, there could be 5 or 6 different great ways to describe something. That's why I would call it an art and not a science, that you become good at it over time. You become better the more years you do it. And it's more difficult to learn because there isn't just one answer to the question of what's the best way to describe this scene.
And with that learning, if we could pivot to the students, I'm sure there's new students that have a lot of assumptions about what audio description is. Can you talk about a way that you and Colleen approach those assumptions, whether they're in alignment or not in alignment with how audio description is done?
I think a fair amount of our students come to audio description training retreats absolutely brand new to the idea, and they're just learning what it is. They're excited about it. They know a little bit about it, but they're brand new. Other people come and have been doing it for a while. I think one of the hardest things for people to understand is one of the sayings is say what you see. That's an audio description. It's nothing that we made up. For people to understand that what that means is you don't say what somebody thinks or what somebody feels. Somebody may look really disappointed, but you must not say they're disappointed. And sometimes as a new student will say, but they look disappointed. And then we say, well, why do you think they look disappointed? And I agree, they look disappointed. How do we know that? We can't read their mind. Well, let's see. His shoulders have slumped and he's frowning and his head's kind of down. Oh, that's what you describe. So I think, I don't know if that's an assumption people come to with it, but it's difficult sometimes for people to put that into practice. They get it. They think they get it as a concept. Say only what you see, and they understand that they're not supposed to say thoughts or feelings, but it's very hard not to.
When you look at your experience in audio description, either as a instructor or as a creator of audio description, do you find that there's one particular opportunity that you faced that you're really proud of how you either overcame it or found a way around a particular challenge?
I think the thing that I'm most proud of that Colleen and I have created is I was craving training and ongoing training as I was working in the field of audio description, and was finding there's a lot of training that focuses on the theory and the rules of audio description, which is an important way to start. But I wasn't finding opportunities to practice, to get feedback, to be critiqued, and to kind of brainstorm, collaborate with people. And so when we created our curriculum, that's the basis of it. We created a curriculum where there's a great deal of time where people are actually practicing audio description and trying it out and talking it over, getting feedback from us, feedback from other students, and learning it by doing it. Because all of these complexities that I've just described to you, you can talk about that in theory, but until you really try to do it, how you put those moving parts all together is easier said than done, and easier to do than to have a theoretical understanding of it. So I'm really proud that we figured out a design of teaching which really seems to work well. It's been well received by our students, and They've been very engaged. And they start out, we do a 20-hour level 1 class, and they start out, many of them, as I've said, have never done it and are just learning about it. We spend 5 hours on the theory, the rules, and disability sensitivity and etiquette, the history of audio description. But then we spend the next 15 hours with the students actually practicing. We take scene by scene, they each take a turn, and they become really good at self-editing, which is very important to be able to do that. They become good at editing each other, giving each other important notes. Colleen and I will give people feedback no matter what level they are, no matter how great they're doing, we'll find something to offer. But what's really exciting is when the students begin to offer suggestions to each other, or say, but wait, didn't you miss that? Or did you notice that? And then you know that they're really getting it. And by the end, we limit our class to 8 students. And by the end, all 8 students in turn, each of them doing many different scenes, describe an entire movie start to finish without stopping. And they're always astounded at the end that they did it and how well they did it, because they tend to do it really well. Not without a few tiny mistakes here and there, not without mistakes at all, but it's really remarkable. So I guess I'm really proud that we came up with what feels like a really useful technique to teach this. So I think it's a hard thing to teach.
Really sounds like it. And there's a parallel in my experience in voiceover, that those workouts that I did, a voiceover workout with other voice talents, where we practiced copy, where we actually got into a booth and recorded stuff and listened back and gave feedback or was given feedback, that practice has been essential to so many different professional endeavors, that this is no exception. And it doesn't, one of the things that I loved hearing about this training, you used the word ongoing, that is not a one and done thing. Can you talk a little bit about how ongoing practice helps audio description?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like any other profession. I mean, teachers, doctors, every kind of, so many professions have continuing education requirements, and well, they should. And this is, of course, audio description should as well. I think that without ongoing critique and training and checking in with other people, collaborating, getting feedback, you don't know what your weak points are. You miss the opportunity to hear somebody give you a tip about something you might not have thought of. There's always more to learn. It's very valuable. It's valuable in an ongoing way to get as much feedback as you can from your users, of course, from your fellow describers as well. And I just think it's very, very important to always consider yourself a learner, to not think, oh, I got this now. And you can be doing this for a long time and still not be doing it perfectly or not be doing it well enough. Sadly, there's sometimes we hear something on TV that's audio described and we, wish it could have been done better. Anything that raises the bar is good.
And with that bar being raised in the last few decades, as audio description has evolved, it sounds like you're adapting as well. Where do you see audio description heading in your dream world?
Well, first of all, I would like it to be something that everybody knows what it is. Everybody knows what closed captioning is for. It's in the vernacular. Everyone knows what a ramp is for. You don't have to tell people. But 99% of the world does not even know what the word audio description refers to. It's starting to get, it's a little more above the radar and not under the radar. I think the fact that people accidentally turn it on when they're trying to get their TV show running is helpful, because they accidentally turn it on and then they learn what it is. Colleen and I know that's part of our mission, is to promote audio description so that people know what it is. But beyond that, one of the things I think that is really necessary, and I hope will be happening soon, it is starting, is the concept of extended description or expanded description. What this is essentially what we call in theatrical audio description pre-show. In theatrical audio description, before the play even starts, the describer will describe the set, the costumes, and really set the stage for the listener, because one doesn't really have a lot of time to describe what people look like, what they're wearing, what the sets are like, what the background's like during a play. And the same thing is true for a TV show or movie. I know that recently Hamilton was described, and I read a lot of feedback on the American Council for the Blind listserv about how upsetting it was that there was not that much description. And it's very common with a musical. It's very difficult to find a space to give description. There's literally, between the songs and the dialogue, there's not much time at all. So if you attached pre-show to something that's on television or a movie, a viewer could have the option to listen to that before the movie starts, to listen to a description of the set and the costumes and who the people are, could have been given to the listeners of the audio description of Hamilton before that played. And then they would have had a visual of how the set was going to work, what people looked like, and you can describe the choreography that's going to be happening during certain songs. And for a TV show, you can flesh it out by a person can start out watching a television show and have an image of what each of the characters looks like and what the house looks like and whatever else is, whatever other details are. If it's animation, I mean, there may be wonderful details, wonderful, colorful, interesting things going on in the background that there just isn't time to describe. It seems to me obvious that you could attach that, as people often have to the DVDs, have these special features. Why couldn't one of them be essentially a pre-show, or what's also known as extended description? I also can imagine that it wouldn't be hard technologically, could be done now, I'm sure, that you could be watching a TV show, say it's a horror flick, and somebody starts screaming and your describer says, this horrible, grotesque monster just showed up out of the closet. Well, you could just click your TV remote and pause it and click the give me more button, essentially, and get a full description of that grotesque monster or whatever. And then when you've heard enough, back you go to the show. Somebody who doesn't want to stop the action could just keep it going, but it could be an option. I know that it's beginning to happen, that there are some shows and movies that are getting this extended or enhanced description, as it's called. But it's really important. I mean, there's a real limit to how much we can describe. And describing what people look like and what they're wearing usually just falls to the wayside. Among other things, the background of where they are, a good description of where they are falls to the wayside too.
Anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
I think the other thing that's really important to remember with audio description is another saying that we didn't make up that's a favorite, is less is more. And I think when you're talking about doing quality audio description, you really need to keep in mind that you are not there to fill up every single silence. Let the movie breathe. Let there be silences as appropriate. Fill in important details when you can and as you need to. The important ones, you have to get them in there. But only the important ones. You really have to prioritize. For one, you need to let the movie breathe. Another reason to consider is that your listener, if you are constantly giving them a barrage of information, it's a lot to process. And it's not necessarily welcome by your listener. For them, every time you describe something, they've got to process that along with the dialogue, and it needs to be important enough because, as Colleen has explained to me and our students, it is exhausting to watch a movie when you're listening to it. You're processing it auditorily, and you're processing the dialogue and the audio description, and that's all well and good, but it's a lot more energy than just watching it. And that's another reason for less is more. But the very best audio describers use very few words, succinct, they get right to the point, they get in and out quickly. And also good audio description means that ideally, you're going to blend into the background. If somebody forgets that you're even describing it, you're doing a great job. Your job is to be a quiet narrator, that you don't want to draw attention to yourself. You're not one of the actors. You're not using dramatic language, appropriate intonation and a voice that suits the scene, of course, is important. You're not going to sound like a robot or completely neutral, but you don't want to be distracting. So those are things that I think it's really important for people to remember.
I think we just had an audio description retreat masterclass here. Thank you for sharing. How can people reach you?
So our website is adtrainingretreats.com. That's AD as in audio description, trainingretreats.com. The name of our company is Audio Description Training Retreats. And the retreats part of the name refers to the fact that we, up until the COVID pandemic, we would gather together with our students in the same house as us for 4 days. We'd share meals together, and there would be a huge amount of opportunity for networking. And there's always a lot of bonding between our students and ourselves during our classes. But when we live together, people really get to do much more networking than they would in a typical conference where you attend a conference and then you go back to your hotel room, and you don't get much opportunity to get to know your fellow participants. So that's why retreats is part of the name. And since we've gone virtual, which we had to do because of the pandemic, we've done the best we can to continue that sense of connection and collaboration, but obviously it's different. One of the important things to remember is that we are not to describe what people think or feel. And in lieu of that, we describe the body language. And if the audio description does not include body language, you've missed out on a huge amount of nuanced, important information. Body language is how we notice that people are falling in love. But eyes are cast down to the floor, eyes lock across the room. Somebody looks at somebody and they look down or they look back. If you miss those little subtle body language nuances, then you have not described what are the most moving parts of the movie. And I think audio description frequently, the peak moments of a movie or a TV show are frequently something that are nonverbal. It's that tender look on somebody's face, or somebody's glaring at somebody, or their fists are clenched. There's moments that if you miss those tiny details, you've missed something really important about how that person feels. And so that, I think, sometimes gets missed in audio description that could be better, as opposed to little scenes from different films. Because we have the continuity within the whole film that we're describing, we see and we know how the characters are going to be moving. So we see something very subtle at the beginning, and we know that that's important. We can recognize that that's an indication of how this person feels about the other here in this scene, and we know that that will be different later. So it's important to mention the frowning here and the raised eyebrow there and the smile there.